This is Julie with Everyday Miracles, and today I am coming through on a promise that I delivered in episode 22 when I talked about someone who has an amazing story that she had an encounter with an angel, and she is here and I get to hear it from her. I know her sister really well, and I've heard it from her, but I haven't heard it from Joe. So Joe, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. She's from Tampa, Florida.
I really believe that this story is a God story. He wants me to say it. I wanted to even write it in a book at time. I felt like a half was prompting. So when you kind of came to me with this, it really kind of was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. You know that. I was all excited.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what I'll do is kind of start back, just tell you a little bit about myself. Like you said, you know, my sister, I am one of 5. I'm the youngest. My next of kin, my sister's, my brother is 5 years older than me. So if you kind of look at that, well, I kind of feel like an only child because they were all going to school when my mother had me. So for 5 years, she had me to herself. Her and my father had their own business, and he was a mechanic. She ran the business end. So every time she went to work, she used to take me with her, you know. Some of the things, you know, when you go back in your childhood, you remember certain things. I could tell you certain things I remember. I remember standing in the car because we didn't have to wear seatbelts right next to her as she's driving. And I remember looking in the rearview mirror and saying, "Mommy, sing Jesus songs to me." You know, she said that from a very young age. I love Jesus. I remember always drawing crosses and Jesus on the cross. I love him and still love him to this day. So as a very young child, I always, you know, adored Christ. I don't know why. I was infatuated with him. She said she would tell you that if she was alive now. But anyway, she used to sing songs to me all the time. My mother was raised Catholic and became born again when we moved here to Florida. I think that was in 89. So, you know, she started going to a Christian church, and, you know, I rebelled. Didn't want it, you know, don't even talk about it, Mom. But let me tell you, he came in full force into my heart, and he never left. He never left. I'm the one who left. I always say that when you feel far away from him, you know,
Yeah,
that's when he's the closest, and you can look back and say, even though I was so far away, he was pursuing me the whole time. So anyway, the story, I kind of wrote myself a little bit of notes trying to keep on track to make sure I don't get off track. Again, we're talking about things you remember when you're a child. I remember my mom having a near-death experience and her telling other people that. I don't know how old I was. I had to have been young because, like I said, my siblings were in school, so I had to be less than 5, right? But I remember her saying that she had gone to the dentist, had a huge fight with my father, which they did all the time. They fought all the time, dysfunctional. Anyway, she said she had a huge fight with my father, went to the dentist, and when he put the laughing gas on her, he said, "Okay, just breathe, you know, breathe calmly, and we'll be right back. We'll do what we need to do." I think they were doing a root canal, and she was mad at my dad, and she was breathing in the gas heavy. At that time, they walked out of the room. Him and the nurse left the room and left her there for the gas to take. And back then, that's what they did. You know, and she said that she remembers I remember the story, her telling it. What I remember of her telling it was that she felt good. She felt peaceful. She felt like she had died and she didn't want to come back. And I remember her saying, and the only reason I say this is because I remember sitting in the back of the car, her telling somebody else's story in the front seat when I was a child. I remember her saying that she was shown me, and my nickname is Poopa. She says, "I remember seeing Poopa and him tell me I had to go back for her." And I remember this story as a young age, but like, you know, I never really questioned. I was young. I was a baby. I never went, "Mommy, tell me the angel." You know, I never did that. And as I grew into an adult, it's just something you remember. Then there was a time I remember too, where my aunt, and I have to tell you, my dad's sister, she stayed home. She didn't drive or anything, so she never really worked. Anyway, kind of going back to the story, remember I'm telling you, my mom was the one who took me to work with her all the time. For whatever reason, this day, my aunt was watching me while my parents were at work. And I loved, at her house, she had a big jar, huge, of vitamin C's, and they were like sweet tarts, you know, they were like the orange sweet tarts. I loved them. So I stick my hand in, I was young, you know, and eat them. And she used to get mad. "Stop, you can't eat all those," you know, and I'd eat them like candy. She'd get so mad at me. Well, in this particular day, we were at her house, and I'm looking, she was anyway, doing her thing wherever she was. And I was going through the cupboards, and I found the vitamin C's. I started taking them. And her daughter, who's 3 years older than me, Andrea, she was taking them too. So we were playing around, her and I. We were in the bathroom, and I opened the medicine cabinet, and there was medicine in, and she's giving me medicine, and she's going, here, take this, right? So I'm taking them, and we're laughing. And I remember leaving the bathroom and my aunt coming out of her room, or where she's coming from, and I remember looking at her and going, and Tessie, I'm tired. And I remember hitting the floor. I remember hitting the wood floor.
Oh my
God. And don't remember much after that. I remember being in a police car, like kind of like this, and the policeman's looking over the back, and he's telling my dad, because I hear my dad's voice, you gotta wake her up, hit her, and he's hitting me. I could see the sirens, like the lights of the sirens, and then I go back out. I remember waking up in the hospital, and the light was so bright, like I would, when you wake up and sleeping and the sun's out, like lights were so bright, and I was trying to see, and it was kind of, I see two people, I hear two people talking and walking towards me, and I look and I see it's my mom and the doctor. I remember that, and it's more like a silhouette of them, but because I couldn't really come to consciousness. That's all I really remember. I don't remember much of any of that story after that. That's all I remember. Just remember her and the doctor talking over me. I don't remember after that, waking up after that, whatever happened after. I don't remember anything. But, was that a near-death experience at that time? Maybe. I didn't know. All I know is that 3 years before my mom died, I never talked to her about that. I never told her that story. I was a baby. I, never had a reason to. And 3 years before she died, for whatever reason, her and I were talking. And I said it was like that day, or whatever we were talking about. I said, when I took those pills. And I said, I remember you coming to the hospital and seeing me. And she looked at me. I said, I remember you were talking to the doctor about me. And she says, I wasn't there. And I said, you weren't at the hospital? I said, I remember you. Because as I saw her face, like when they walked up, I remember seeing their face and me being relieved. My mom's here. Everything's okay. My mommy's here, She's like, oh, I never went to the hospital. She said, that day I went to the dentist. And she goes, and I nearly died myself on the chair. That was the same day. So that's why me and my sister were just talking today, because I'm asking her the age, and she goes, yeah. She goes, that makes sense. She goes, because she took you to the shop all the time. Of course, she would drop you off at Aunt Tessie's house. She had to go to the dentist. She goes, I never related the two stories. Well, we never related. Me and my mom were just kind of and I'm like, Mom, you were there with the angels. She says, I wasn't there. And I remember as a child her saying that she saw me and knew she had to go back for me. So that's kind of odd. We knew there was some sort of connection. There was a spiritual connection there. Wow, Mommy and my mother were in awe about that story. Nothing much about it. But on the day she died, or before I should say that even that week before she died, and when she found out she was going to die and she decided she's not taking chemo. Now my mom went through 4 cancers and decided no chemo through all of them. And then with the last, of course they medicated her with other things, radiation, all that stuff, 12 years go by and she's given the diagnosis of kidney cancer, and she's looking at me. I'm like, you're done. She's like, I'm done. Mommy, I don't want to do anything. So we knew she was going to just let go. And quite honestly, we'd say 12 years of my mom, 4 cancers, right? This particular cancer took her in a month. So I remember when she came home on hospice, she's had a morphine pump and stuff. And I said, are you worried? And she's like, no. I said, are you scared? And she said, no. And I said, are you worried? She's like, a little bit. I said, about what? She goes, you. I'm like, thinking me. I'm like, if anybody of all my siblings, I got it all together. I should be worried about them. No, just kidding. I couldn't understand why me, why she worried about me, but we were very close. Everywhere she went, I went, it was, when she found out she was dying, the doctor told her on the phone that she had cancer of the kidneys. And he's like, I want to send you for some ultrasounds. And she's like, okay, he goes, we're going to go today. He goes, I'm going to call and try and get you in right away. She said, okay. So later that afternoon, we were driving to get the ultrasound done. And what came to me was a song that I heard when we were just moving into our house when she was diagnosed. That she's actually, the day that first night she was going to spend the night in the house is when we get the call that she has this kidney cancer. So prior to that, I was painting, and this song came on at, who is it? Brandon Heath, I believe. And it came on the radio. I'm painting, I'm on the ladder, I'm painting, and a song comes on, and I'm listening to it. And the Holy Spirit tells me my mom is going to die. It's probably a week before we know the diagnosis, right? And I just immediately said, oh, I'm bawling, trying to get down the stairs and look at my husband. He's like, what's the matter? And I'm like, she's going to go. I just knew it. He told me she was going to go. And so now we're in the car and the song comes to mind now. She's just gotten the diagnosis, right? We decide we're not doing anything. We're on our way to get this ultrasound and the song comes to mind. So I'm like, Mom, I want you to hear something. And she's like, okay. And I put the radio on and I put the CD on and I play that song. And in the midst of the song, seemed like just around the same time that it got me, she looks at me, she goes, Mita. And she goes, I'm going home. Like, she just starts bawling. Like, she's so happy she's going home. And I'm crying. I'm like, Mommy, I can't believe I'm not going with you. It's the one place in life we're not going together, because we're always together. Like, anyway, just kind of think about that story, kind of touches my heart because I knew she was going. And I'm so glad Jesus took her as soon as he did, because I didn't want her to linger. But anyway, and she kind of did a little bit. I used to always, I went before my father died. I did come. I was 8 months pregnant, flew from Arizona to Florida and took care of my dad. Felt like the Lord wanted me there that last month of his life. And then my husband's mother, she too, I took 3 months when my kids were very young. Hannah was just starting kindergarten. Haley's, 2.5 years younger than her. I left them and went to New York, did a travel nurse assignment to take care of my mom, my mother-in-law, who was like my mother. And, with my mom, I always said, God, please take her quick. I've done this for you, this for you. All I ask is that this is fast, please let it be fast. I can't see her suffer. And I know she didn't want to be turned in a bed, although I would have done it every day. I didn't want that for her. She didn't want that. She didn't want us to be a burden on us. And when she was on hospice, I had to beg her, just please, come home, stay in my house. And she's like, I don't want to die in front of the girls, baby. I don't want to die in Haley's room, which is where I had her because it was the coolest room in the house. She was always sweaty. I'm like, Mom, it's the best room. And I did oncology nursing forever. And I've seen so many deaths. And quite honestly, I'm going to tell you, I really believe that death is so much more beautiful, even birth. And birth is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but I never looked at death as sad. I looked at it as like, yay, it's sad. I'm not going to be with you, but yay, I'm so happy for you, I never looked at it as sad. I'm sad for me. We're the ones who're sad, right?
Yeah.
They're not, they're going to be in bliss. But anyway, I begged her. I'm like, Mom, I got to ask you to bless me and my children. I want them to experience death in a beautiful way, not in a sad way. Can you just please do it for me? And so she did. She agreed. And anyway, Friday, she had slipped into her coma Friday night, and it had to be cleaned every 2 hours. She was on a morphine pump that you had to push for meds, it wasn't continuous. So, and it was the weekend. Here was a Friday, and hospice doesn't come but on Monday through Friday, unless it's an emergency.
Yeah.
But I'm a nurse too. So I know what to do. So anyway, I started to clean her. I figured, what, I'll just wait till Monday. Unless she passes before then I'll call them, but I'll wait until Monday and they'll come and evaluate and then we'll see where we're at. Well, I shouldn't even say till Monday. I didn't know when it was going to be, but I knew that I could wait through the weekend and kind of just see how she goes, right? They didn't send the nurse for the weekend or anything. So I kind of stood by her side the whole time. I pushed the button. I knew I could do it every 15 minutes. So if I heard her moaning before then, I'd push it at 15. If not, I was pushing it every 30. So she was getting her medication and turning her. And by Sunday, I should say, I was exhausted. I was just tired because I was up through the night because I'd get up and push that button, right? Push that button. If I heard her, if I'd fall asleep and hear her moaning, I'd get up and push the button. And Sunday, I get up and I'm like, God, I got to tell a funny story. I always say he talks to me when I'm on the throne. I think that's the only time that I was quiet. I'm alone with my thoughts. I'm like, God, I'm so mad. I was so mad at you. Like, I asked you, like, please take her quickly. And here we are. I don't get it. Like, why? And I heard him say to me, I need her here. I need her here right now. Can you do this for me? And then he spoke to my heart. It was like the Holy Spirit speaking to my heart. He's like, I need her to let go because she can't go into heaven with what she's holding on to. She has to let it go on her own. It's funny because I think about myself. That's true. Nothing impure can go in there. My mother held a lot of guilt, resentment, bitterness, different things that happened to her in life. It was almost like her life flashed before me within that instant. And it was when he said, I need her here. I need her to let go. It was almost like her life flashed before me. And I was like, absolutely, I can do it, but you got to give me strength to do this. You have to give me the strength. And from that moment on, he gave me manna for that moment, for that day, for whatever it was. Every morning I'd wake up exhausted and he'd give me manna. He'd give me whatever it was. But Monday morning, the day of her death, I woke up and I was like, oh God, here we go. And I'm like, all right, I gotta go. I think, I can't even know why. I think my husband laid with her for the end of the, and then he left for work. He stayed with her for a little bit. He wanted me to get some sleep. So I was in my own bed and he woke me up. I think that's when I got up and went in, and I was like, okay, here we go. And, so anyway, I'm getting ready to go in the room with her. And like I said, I'm in prayer. Just God, give me the strength for this. So when I go in there, I see her and I turn her and I clean her up, and the doorbell rings. And I'm thinking to myself, I got to get ready to wash her. I'm going to clean her up today. I wanted to clean her hair. Kind of was all weekend long. She'd gone through. I'm like, I gotta wash her hair. And I know how to do all this stuff. But do I have the supplies? Do I have this? Anyway, the doorbell rings, and I go to answer the door, and it's the nurse's aide. And I'm like, hey. She's like, hey. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, there must have been relief on my face, because she's like, oh my God, every time I see you, you always have a smile on your face. You're so happy with all you're going through. You always are smiling. But really, I was like, oh God, you're here.
Yes.
Anyway, she's like, I brought all this stuff. I have some more diapers. I have this, I have that. And I'm like, yeah. And I go, she goes, are we going to get her up today? Because I always made her get her up to the shower. She kept saying, we could wash her in bed. And I'm like, no, I'm a nurse. We'll get her in the shower. She goes, we're getting her up today. I'm like, today we're not getting her up. No, we're going to do it in the bed. And she's like, oh, okay. She goes, all right, let me grab. I go, can we do her hair? And she's like, sure. She goes, I have some stuff in the car. I'll be right back. She goes in. I said, just come on in. So I get in the room and I'm starting to get mommy up. And she walks in and she looks at her. She looked at me. She looked at her. She's like, oh my God, what happened? And I'm like, yeah, she took a turn this weekend. She's like she didn't expect this. She expected my mom to be sitting in a chair or whatever I was doing, because I always got her up, So she's like, you could tell. She's like, oh my gosh. She's like, I'm so sorry. You could tell she was trying to compose herself. She's like, okay. Like all right. So we clean her up. We did her hair. We made her look good. And she goes, I'm going to call the nurse. She's like, I'll call him. She goes, and tell him to come out and come and do an evaluation. She goes, I think you're probably ready for 24-hour care. Like a nurse to be here 24 hours now. Because that's how they did it. They didn't do it unless they were like, you needed that. Yeah. She goes, I'll have him, or his name was Orlando, the nurse. I'll have Orlando come out and do an evaluation. I was like, okay. She's like, okay. So she leaves. And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, every morning I get her vitals, her, temperature, pulse, all that stuff, right? I always get her vitals, and I didn't do it this morning. I'm like, dang. So I go grab the stuff and I go in there and I'm doing her vitals, and I go to do her blood pressure and it says error on it. And I look at her and I'm like, she's breathing, right? She's okay. So I do it again. I figure it's in the wrong spot. Do it again, error. I'm like, maybe the batteries are going dead. And just so happened the nurse left his little blood pressure cuff, and I brought it over. I put it on, and it works, and it gets me like 74/32, right? So I kind of like looked at her and I grabbed her pulse, and I'm listening. It's kind of a little bit thready, and I'm like I can't breathe. Okay. I'm like, mommy, like just like that. I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I know inside, I'm like, I'm not okay, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
So I run out of the room and I'm like, what do I do? Oh my God, who do I go? I get my phone. I call my brother. He's on the way to work. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey. I go, it's time. I think she's going. And I tell him the story. He works X-ray tech. He works at Moffitt. He's like, okay, I'm on my way to work. I'm going to call in. He goes, I'm going to go. He goes, I got to get to the funeral. We got to pay for that. It's crazy stupid. If they die, it's more money than if they're alive. And he was just on the brink of making the payment. He's like, I'm going to go out there and make my payment. He goes, and that's like an hour away. Okay. He goes, then I'm heading straight over to you. So where he's is, it's like almost 45 minutes to an hour to get to where he has to go and then come back another hour and 40 minutes. So I'm thinking he's going to be right by my side, but he's not, so I get off the phone with him and I'm like, what do I do? And I go back in there, look at her, I'm petting her, and I'm like, mommy, I'm like, it's okay, go. I'm like, go be with daddy. And I was saying this because I don't want her to suffer. And I'm like, yay. And I'm like, part of me is just so excited. The doorbell rings. Sorry. I should have brought tissues.
It's okay.
So I'm like, I'm like thinking, who's at the door? And I go run to the door, and it's this guy, and he's got a hospice badge on, and he goes, hi. He goes, Joe? And I said, yeah. And he says, I want to say his name was Raphael. He gave me a Hispanic name. He was a Hispanic man. I can still see him, short. He was kind of like my mom's height. And he goes, I'm with social services. He goes, is it okay if I come in? And I'm like, sure. And I'm like, I have a social worker. And I go, she came, such and such day. He goes, yeah. He goes, we just do follow-ups with you to make sure everything's going okay. Is it okay? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, sure, come on in. And I'm like, how'd you get past? And we have a gate. First off, a couple things. The nurse's aide didn't call me because she knew the gate code. And she told me she was coming back on Monday. But if somebody from hospice comes, they always call and tell you so-and-so is going to be coming. Now, of course, my mind is somewhere else. My mom's dying, right? At this point, I'm not even thinking. I'm like thinking, how'd you get past the gate? But somebody must ring in. They have to call me to bring them in. Mm-hmm. And they never called. This is all stuff that I sort of thought about later, like, wow, nothing. He just appeared at my door, right? So I go, sure, come on in. So I look, he has a badge. He's well dressed, just like a suit. He's very formal in a sense. I wouldn't have never guessed he was just some Joe Schmo off the street, So he says, oh, he goes, beautiful house. He goes, you look Hispanic. And he talks to me in Spanish. I go, yeah, I'm Puerto Rican. I said, I don't speak it. So don't try. So, he's like, I go, sit down, sit on the couch. So we sat down, and where I sat, he was kind of like here. My mom's room's over here, right? So I'm like looking at him this way, the couch, and then her doorway's here. So I'm talking to him, and he says, so where are your parents from? And I said, oh, my father's from Iowa, my mom's from, I believe, San Dulce. And he goes, oh, he goes, how are you? He goes, they're both Puerto Rican. He goes, how was that? And I go, what? He goes, being raised Puerto Rican. He goes, I'm Puerto Rican too. And he's telling me his story, and I'm like, yeah. I go, it was good. He goes, how was your childhood? And I'm like, it was good. I'm like thinking to myself, that's weird. He's a social worker. He's going to ask me questions like this. And I go, it was good. It was good. And he goes, yeah. He goes, you got good memories? And I said, I do. I said, I really believe my mom and dad did what they needed to, in their life, and they had the tools that they had, was it perfect? No. Were there bad times? Absolutely. But when I look back, the memories were all good, and I wouldn't give them up for the world. My mom and dad, and I told him my dad died, and, so anyway, so he says, he goes, good. He goes, well, this is tough. I go, this morning I just took my mom's vitals. It looks like she's getting closer. I'm waiting for the nurse to get here. And he says, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And he goes, do you have the book, the hospice? I go, oh, yeah. They have a hospice book, and everybody has to sign it when they come to visit. So it wasn't uncommon for him to ask me for that. So I'm like, yeah, let me go get it. I go run in her room. I grab the book, and I bring it back, put it on the table. And he goes, do you know? He goes, they have counseling. And I go, yeah. And he goes, and he's going through the book, and he goes to the end of it. He goes, here's the counseling page. He goes, will you get counseling? And I go, of course. And he goes, will you do it? Because he's talking about the girls too. He asked me a whole lot of questions just about my life. And then he goes, would you take the girls? And I go, absolutely. And he goes, do you promise? And I go, I promise. I go, I'll bring the girls. And he goes, okay. And so I go, well, now this is the weirdest thing, and everybody probably think I'm crazy when I say this, but this is the weirdest thing. I said to him, I said, do you want to go like meet her? And I kind of did this. And when I did this, I could hear my mom's heartbeat. I swear, in this ear. And you ever have that feeling like you're going to pass out? It's almost like you could hear your heartbeat in your ears. Mm-hmm. And like, even like if there's somebody talking, it fades away, and you can see their lip moving, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to pass out. Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly the feeling I had. I'm feeling this heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, that's my mom. Maybe she's going. Like we're having this connection, like she's going to go, and I'm not going to be in the room. So now I'm like feeling this sense of anxiety. And it seriously, as I'm hearing this, boom, boom, everything goes slow motion. And it's almost like I turn my head and I look back at him, and it's just slow motion. And I go, oh my God, I'm looking at him, and he's just staring at me in the face, in the eyes. And he said, and I go, you're an angel. And then it was, come back into myself. And literally don't remember this until after the fact, right? Come back into myself, and I look at him, I go, do you want, it was almost like I continued on. I'm like, do you want to go meet her? Like, you haven't been here. You haven't met her yet. And he's like, he looks, he's like, sure. So I'm like, yeah, now, because I'm thinking, I got to go check her, right? Because this is how it ended, and now it's how it was beginning, right? So I go gas the end up. I go in the room, and I walk in there, and I go check, like I'm checking if she's breathing, like, mom, and I look, and he's at the doorway. He won't come in. He's at, like, almost not even like to be seen. He's just looking. And I go, you could come in. And he's like, I really need to get going. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, it's really great talking to you. I walk him to the door, halfway to the door, because he's like, I can leave from here. He goes, you can go back to your mom. And I was like, okay, you sure? And he's like, yeah. Because I'm good. And he left. I go into mom, and now I'm, okay, who do I call? I got to call people, start calling my sister, everybody, and the day goes on. And that night she passed away. And I look back now and I'm like, okay, I have to say, I shouldn't even say this. Orlando comes later that day, and he says, I told him, I said, hey, the social worker came today. And he's like, social worker? And I go, yeah. And I said, and he said her name. And I said, no, it was Guy. His name was, and I knew at the time, like I said, Raphael was Spanish name. And he said, he's looking at me. He's like, Joe, we don't have any male social workers. And I'm like, well, maybe he wasn't from social work. And he goes, well, get the book. He goes, yeah, they have to sign the book. And I'm like, oh yeah, he asked for the book. And I grab the book, I give it to him, and he's looking, he's like, nobody signed the book. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, okay, what did he look like? And I tell him, short guy, Hispanic, he had a little bit of a beard. Joe, we have nobody like that. Nobody. And he's like, maybe another chapter. He goes, let me look into it. I'll find out. I'll go to the office. I'll let you know. I'll call you back. Okay. No big deal. Totally blow it away again. So mom passes. I go to counseling, and this counseling's off McDill, downtown Tampa. My mother lived downtown Tampa. So it's like, take this route and go over there. But anyway, I go to this counselor, and I tell her this story about this guy. And at that time, I'm remembering, like, oh God, I remember fading off. Like, I remember, like, that's come back to my memory. Didn't, because my mom died. I was too busy with a funeral, people coming in from out of town. I never kind of stopped to say, oh my God, I didn't stop for that. But all this stuff is kind of coming back. And because Orlando said he didn't know who this was, now I'm like, but not really taken by it. So much still going on. So immediately go to this counselor, and I tell her, and she's like, she goes, maybe another chapter. But she goes, I know all the social workers in the other chapters. There's no male social workers. She's like, I don't. And I described, she's like, I don't know anybody by the description. Like, she had no idea. Right. And this is a woman who does this. Right.
Yes.
So she's just, and I'm like, it had to be. And I tell her now, this is what happened, and I'm like, it had to be. And she's kind of like a believer. She's like thinking to myself, yeah, So I'm like, wow, that's so cool, And Angel actually came to my house. He made sure I was okay. But I remember how I was feeling. So my mother was probably like, send somebody in there. You got to go in there, Who knows what she was saying? Oh, my mother, she was getting the whip out like, Jesus, take care of it. I know her. She had her pull. You want me? You better take care of her.
Oh.
Anyway, so, I look back at that, and I'm like in awe. Like, okay, that's so awesome. And whenever like certain things happen in my life, I just remember that. God, send it. But this is the really, really cool part of that whole entire thing. Was like, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, God, was that my angel or her angel? Like, whose angel was that? It was definitely an angel. I get that. But whose was it? Like, was it mine, right? Or was it hers? So I'm thinking about that, and God brings to my spirit the remembrance of her near-death experience and my near-death experience. And that man was the man that came to her with her in the hospital was her height, just as this guy was. I saw their faces, and I'm thinking to myself, that was him. So it has to be her angel, right? I don't know. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't. All I know is that it came full circle. It's like,
wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that part.
True. I know. And this, I was telling my sister too. I'm like, T, I never really talked to you. She lives in North Carolina now. I never really talked to you to tell you the rest of the story, but this is what God's revealed to me.
Wow. I didn't know how you were going to swing that back to
same day. I know. And I was hoping not to. That's why I wrote it all out.
Oh my gosh. I think it's beautiful. I mean, I didn't know too. She didn't tell me where he had to have the gate code like that. Then you didn't even think about that at the time. Like, how did he even get in here?
And in an instant.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I had sent you a text message. We have had to repost or reschedule this a couple of times. And one of the days I was communicating with her. I was reading Acts, the book of Acts. Our church is doing a Bible study right now, and which is so fun. Of course, doing this miracle podcast, what better place to be reading?
Right.
But there's a place that I sent her one day, and this is in the Message translation. It actually says in Acts 10, I believe, where Cornelius is greeted by an angel. It actually says in the Bible, an angel of God, as real as his next door neighbor, came in and said, Cornelius. And I read and I was thought of this story. And and also when I interviewed Chaplain David Carl, who has been a chaplain 45 years, he tells a story of a patient in the hospital who's greeted by an angel who looks like a man, just like what you described, in worker attire, and he says, yeah, he just left the room. And the door never opened. The nurse was outside the room. The chaplain had just come in, and the man was giving him reassuring messages that he was going to be okay. And he
Wow.
said, yeah, he was here. And he told him the whole guy. He's like, yeah, he just went. And he turned, there was no one there. So, and then the chaplain also talks about, and in the Bible, we hear about stories where they're more ethereal, more like what we kind of typically think an angel would look like. But I think it's beautiful. And again, I stressed this in the angel episode, and I know you're on the same page with me. We don't worship angels, but how awesome is it that we can sit back and see what God is doing to give us comfort at a time of pain. And you were praying out to him. You were saying, God, I need you. I need help. And you were trying to get some comfort, and he sent exactly what you needed.
Well,
So
the
it
whole
blows my mind.
from beginning, you look at, is God with you from the beginning, from my childhood, even as a baby, he was right there. His angels watching over us, right? And they watch over us. That's their duty. That's their job. Here's a really cool ending to this is, I went to counseling, and I told the counselor, of course, I go through my whole month of counseling. She's like, you're doing good. You're just progressing the way normally you should. You're not, holding on. I see you're going to be fine. And then she's like, I guess she goes, and I told her I was concerned about my daughter. She goes, can you get them to come? And I'm like, they don't want to come. They didn't want to go. They were like, Mom, we're fine. Meanwhile, they never cried. They never anything. Like, it's almost like they didn't have emotion. I felt like they need to get this out, right? So I'm more worried as a mother. And plus the fact that I promised this man and my mother that I would get it. So I'm like, I got to get them here. So she goes, we have a family night. And she goes, can you get your husband to come? I'm like, yeah, I'll get my husband to come. She goes, well, if you get your husband to come, the girls will have to come. She goes, and then you do a family night. And she goes, and you can see how they are. And I'm like, okay. So that night, we go out to dinner nearby. And after dinner, I said, girls, we got one more stop to make. And then I tell them, I break them, Mom, we don't need this. And I'm like, listen, appease me, just let me know. Let's just do this. It's a family night. We're all going together. It's not like you're going by yourself. I convince them. Now they're all nervous. They're on the way. We get to turn into this hospice center where they have in the counseling. And as we turn in, and I'm going to tell you, it's Florida day, beautiful, not a cloud not a cloud in the sky, just blueness, right? As we turn in, we see this huge, huge rainbow, huge, going right over the parking lot. We were all, as big as it was, we were all like, wow, you could see all the lights of the colors of the rainbow just perfect. I wish I would have had a cell phone back then. I think I had one, but I don't think it took pictures like I would have gotten it. There was probably one of those, you got to hit A, B, C, D to get C.
Yeah.
It was one of those, and we were all like in awe, like, wow, this is so beautiful, like, wow. And my husband goes, look, he goes, isn't that your mom, where your mom lived? The apartment where a rainbow ended right on her apartment. No lie. They could tell you if they were here right now, they'd tell you. Like, we were all like, I'm like, my mom's so happy that we're here. Like, she must be she's so happy that we're here. So funny. Yeah. We came out of there. The girls are like, Mom, we're fine. I'm like, okay. He was in there. His brother died 7 years ago, and he's still there. She's like, we're fine. We're fine.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. I love
circle.
Yeah, I love it. It was almost like an indication that you kind of told you.
I love you.
Again,
you did what I asked you to do. Beyond the grave.
Well, and even he gave you comfort in the moment, because that had to be rough moments there at the end. It was coming and you knew it. And for him to come at just that time, God, we just praise you, God, that you can use your angels that way to give us what we need in the moment when we need it.
Absolutely. I think, you go expecting, and I know I went expecting as far away from God that I felt like he was in the moment. I felt like, God, where are you? Where are you? I need you right now. He was there, and it was me that, again, that ran away, right? It's me that felt far away. I was looking at the moment and what was going on and not him as much as I should have. I don't know. I shouldn't even say that, because I think it needed the concentration of my own self needed to be where it needed to be. But I'll tell you what, how many times do you go through life and you look back and you're like, wow, he was all over that, and I didn't feel him at all, right? You look at every moment that happened and everything that happened, it was like all for a reason. It had to be, it had to go that way. And look at how he was in control. He was, right?
Absolutely.
Crazy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing this with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm thrilled just to give God the glory for the beautiful ways that he's always protecting us. And I thank you. I want to shout out to Tisha for connecting us. So thank you. Love you dearly. And you've included her in some other podcasts too. Nameless, but still. Anyway, love you guys. And I guess, is there anything else you want to say?
No, just keep doing what you're doing, girlfriend. Okay. I got more stories. Whenever you're ready, you come out and we'll talk about others.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening. I hope you were inspired. And if you have a miracle that you would like to share with me, reach out to me at everydaymiraclespodcast@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to check it out. Thanks. God bless.